large political party, but Sue Montgomery's on the other side of that. Really should talk about Sue Montgomery a bit. She is trying to get re-elected as the mayor of Côte-des-Neiges, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce borough. But she's had quite a contentious 4 years in her first mandate, made a good number of enemies, being accused of workplace harassment and other unethical behavior. Was actually found guilty, if I'm not mistaken, of workplace harassment and other unethical behavior by the Quebec Municipal Commission, but she appealed that ruling to Superior Court, and that appeal was heard some weeks ago, and so hopefully there'll be a ruling in the not too distant future before the election on November 7th. So hopefully there'll be a ruling this week coming up. But in the meantime, I'm trying to make it clear to the media and the Montreal public, and especially Côte-des-Neiges, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce voters, that they have a child sex abuse cover-up enabler for their mayor. One who abusively misuses the SPVM and the criminal justice system to shut down a peaceful public protest against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse that includes pedophilia and rape. So people are actually leaving. Oh, this is the woman who called me crazy earlier. I don't think it was recorded on video. I think my camera, oh, she's going away, but she did call me crazy. So I'll just remind you that the real crazy people are the crazy people at the Unitarian Universalist Association who hired Stikeman Elliott, barristers and solicitors defamation lawyer, to falsely accuse me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers.
You're the crazy one.
I'm the crazy one. Oh, you insist on me being the crazy one. The other crazy people are the ones who say I'm crazy when I'm not crazy. And also anyone who claims that there's zero sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church and zero cover-up and denial. They're the crazy ones, my dear. So she repeated it. She did say it earlier, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't recorded. I noticed that the camera wasn't running soon after that incident, and so it may not have been recorded. So I decided to, bring up the issue again, so at least that was recorded. And she called me crazy again. So she's very insistent in calling me crazy. And this is unfortunate, because this is what happens. Like, you get these people who think you're crazy because you're protesting against clergy abuse and the cover-up and denial of clergy abuse and so on and so forth. Although the real crazy ones are the ones that try to pretend that there's no clergy sexual abuse in the Unitarian Universalist religious community. I mean, that makes no sense at all. And yes, one of those people is Montreal Unitarian Sue Montgomery. She, as I think I've already mentioned, has told 3 journalists that there's no sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church. Those are her exact words. There's no such sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church. She claims that she looked into it and clearly found nothing. She claims there's no cover-up or denial while she's denying it herself. It's just sheer insanity, really, because a certain number of Unitarian Universalist ministers and Sunday school teachers and lay people, leading prominent lay people, have been charged, tried, and convicted of the sexual abuse of children. And then there's quite a bit of clergy sexual misconduct, which may not be of a criminal nature per se, but nonetheless falls under, sexual exploitation, sexual harassment, so on and so forth. So there's definitely a fair bit of that kind of thing. There's a minimum of 400 Unitarian Universalist congregations that have been affected by sort of clergy sexual misconduct of one kind or another. And it's more like, in real terms, it's probably all of them. At some point in Unitarian Universalist history, there's probably been some sexual misconduct of one kind or another on the part of the minister. So I'm actually a little surprised to see people exiting the church around noon when the meeting's starting. I guess maybe they can't participate or just don't want to participate. They may just be visitors, not, signed up members, whatever. I mean, you do have to be a card-carrying member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal to actually vote. So there may be people who attend the church but aren't actually fully fledged members, or again, they may not be interested in voting for one reason or another. So yeah, there's the balloons, and yes, they are to some extent, they're a bit of an annoyance for pedestrians. I mean, they don't bother me, but I can imagine that some pedestrians aren't thrilled. My own picket signs do traverse the sidewalk, but I stand aside, when I see someone coming from even a couple hundred feet away. I basically move aside. I certainly move aside when they're getting relatively close, so that they can pass without obstruction, because I have been falsely accused of obstructing the sidewalk, which I certainly am not doing intentionally. So, on the rare occasion where I don't see someone, maybe they come up behind me and I'm blocking the way, all they have to do is alert me to their presence and I'll step out of the way. So I actually moved some of the balloons that were on the outer part of the sidewalk because they were actually getting blown into the bike lane and potentially causing an accident with cyclists. So they were certainly distracting cyclists, and some were moving from the inner lane to the outer lane to avoid the balloons, and then, almost having a head-on collision with people coming the other way. I saw some evidence of that. And I also saw evidence of a possible distracted cyclist going through a red light and almost, well, I don't know if he was almost hit by a car, but the car certainly honked. He went through the red light ahead there, and it could have been because he was annoyed and distracted by the balloons. He might have been thinking about the balloons and not noticed that the light was red and gone through it. So these balloons are somewhat problematic. I suppose a similar type of thing could potentially happen in terms of my own protest, but I've never seen any clear evidence of that. And I've been protesting for almost a quarter century now, May 1998 to September, October 2021. And, knowing what I know about the Unitarian Church of Montreal and the Unitarian Universalist Association, this protest might be going on for some more months and years if they don't come around to actually practicing justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And as I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of the 8th principle, which specifically addresses internal oppressions in the church. You can be sure I will be bringing that to their attention, and how they have continuously oppressed and repressed my complaints and criticism and grievances and protests and so on in multiple ways, including bringing trumped up criminal charges against me over the course of a quarter century or so. Because although my protest started in 1998, my initial formal grievances, not that there weren't some earlier ones, but my initial formal grievance was against Reverend Ray Drennan for labeling me psychotic and slandering an interreligious event that it organized as a cult, and one or two other things. And I complained about this, and I asked for retraction, I asked for an apology, and au contraire, the church basically backed Drennan, both locally and at the UUA. The UUA Ministerial Fellowship Committee actually had the unmitigated gall to say that Reverend Ray Drennan's behavior, as I described it in a lot more detail in my letter of grievance, seemed to us to be within the appropriate guidelines of ministerial leadership. So they're saying that it's within the appropriate guidelines of ministerial leadership for a Unitarian Universalist minister to rudely interrupt someone as they're trying to explain a religious experience, saying, "You mean your psychotic experience," and angrily insisting that they seek psychiatric treatment, and also to rudely interrupt them as they're trying to explain a in a religious event and saying, "You mean your cult?" And when I asked Reverend Ray General, "What do you mean by cult?" because I do know it can have a broader meaning than the derogatory one, he came back and said, "I mean a manipulative and secretive religious group." So clearly meaning a dangerous cult. What was interesting about that is one could actually describe the Unitarian Church of Montreal and the Unitarian Universalist Association as a manipulative and secretive religious group. They're certainly manipulative in their responses to clergy misconduct complaints, and they're also extremely secretive about clergy misconduct, especially the sexual abuse of children by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, etc. So yes, most ironically, the Unitarian Church of Montreal and the Unitarian Universalist religious community more generally actually fits Reverend Ray Drennan's definition of a cult, i.e. a manipulative and secretive religious group, at least when it comes to the issue of clergy sexual misconduct that includes such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. So, just let this woman pass here and then we'll have a look and see what the...
Excuse me.
Yep.
You speak French?
Oui.
Ok. 49,98, c'est ici?
Pardon?
49,98.
Ça va être dans cette direction-là, oui. Je ne sais pas où il est, mais c'est dans cette direction-là.
Ah, je pense que c'est dans l'immeuble ici.
C'est bien possible.
Ok, merci.
Mais je ne sais pas. So we've got some people outside in the sort of awning area outside the entrance there. And I think we will have to check the camera because I think we're coming to the end of the recording time. And yeah, we got about 40 seconds left. So I think we're going to end this clip and start a fresh one.